everyone, and welcome to the Homeschool Success podcast with Kami Wanous. And I have a super amazing guest today. Chris Remboldt is here with us, and he is so awesome. He's going to share with us a lot about homeschooling and how it can actually make you successful, like how the skills you learn homeschooling actually help you in the real world today. And he is awesome. I'm going to tell you about him a little bit, but he's super successful. He went to college. He got in corporate. He was successful there. And then he's a multi-entrepreneur now. I say multi-entrepreneur. Is that even the right word?
It feels like the right word.
Yeah, it feels like the right multiple businesses anyways, multiple businesses.
Yeah.
So awesome, you guys. This is going to be super fun. So first thing I want to do is I want to just go ahead and talk about why people have such hesitation about homeschooling sometimes. You know, it's what we're used to, right? We're always talking about, okay, we're used to, public schooling. Oh, I'm sorry. But we're used to public schooling, and we're used to like going straight to college and then getting the job or whatever. But we're not sure if homeschooling is going to get us to that place, right? And so that's what I want to focus on, is making sure that we know after today that we are going to get our kids to success wherever they end up being, whether it be entrepreneur, having a corporate job, whatever the case, and they're going to be totally fine. And I know that that is my jam. That's my message all the time to you guys, is that you are going to set your kids up for success, even more so possibly than they were when they went to school. And so that is, everybody always says, I'm going to mess my kids up. I don't want them to fail. I don't want to fail them. I want to make sure they're going to be able to do whatever they want in the future, and they will, because the keys to homeschooling, part of the skills that are not academic necessarily in terms of knowledge, are the skills that you need for being successful in the world, right? So, and Chris is going to tell us all about that. So, Chris, can you just kind of give us a little background on just like how you were, you were homeschooled, or just kind of introduce yourself a little bit to us?
Yeah. So I was homeschooled K through 12. I am the oldest of four kids. So I was the test shot for my parents. Um, they got to try every decision they made on me first, which was fun. They're great people. I have a great relationship with my parents to this day. Live about an hour away from them out there on their farm, but they got into homeschooling actually through a well-known cult. But luckily, they didn't stick with the cult. They were like, "This is a little weird," but they kept the homeschooling part. And so um, I ended up growing up in not rural, suburban Kansas, which feels rural to most people. 3 acres. We had some horses. My grandma gave me the Little House on the Prairie books, and she would get us Lego sets. And my parents would buy me books all the time, especially classic literature. And I just grew up reading, playing outside, exploring the stream, exploring the neighbor's pond, walking through the harvested soybean fields, and just kind of reenacting the adventures of Laura Ingalls and the other literary heroes that I had. I didn't have too many friends outside of church. That was the one thing that I didn't really like that much, but I turned out okay. And I still have great relationships today. And some of those friends that I made actually ended up being like lifelong friends. So it's the quality, not the quantity, right?
Yeah, I love that I didn't know you were from Kansas. My dad's from Kansas. He's from Garden City, Kansas.
No kidding. I've been there. Like
Yeah,
five people have been there. I've been there.
I know, right? That's hilarious. That's awesome. I love that. And so how did, when we talk about, being homeschooled K through 12, you were homeschooled back in a time when like homeschooling was not like a popular thing at all. It was, even when I started with my son, it was just something that not very many people did. But
Yeah.
this was a time when you were homeschooling, it was really like, wow, that was like not, that was not a thing.
It was a revolutionary act. And my mom was always a little bit paranoid that the state would make her stop.
Yes. Yeah. And I love your parents. Give them high fives for me. Thank them for us because, man, they
Oh,
are
I do.
pioneers. They are pioneers. And I love it. And those people are the ones that lay the foundation for all the rest of us. And so I love what you were talking about in terms of how you were homeschooled, because it sounds like it was like a mixture between classical education and then also unschooling. So it
We
was
didn't even know what unschooling was, but
right.
they would make sure to get us like some grade level stuff, usually like 3 or 4 grades above where I was at, because like the younger grade stuff could be hard to find. And so I was always punching above my weight with the curriculum I was reading, and I got used to a certain level of difficulty, and just like how many times I would have to reread something to understand it. My mama took us to standardized testing. And like when I was 8, like every single subject I tested in the college level, on all of it at 8 years old. And
That's
she's super
awesome.
proud of that, as she should be. And it's
Absolutely.
not because I'm awesome or anything. I just didn't have anything better to do other than work on what was
It
in
was
front of me.
Kansas, man.
Yeah.
No offense to the Kansas people.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. I love that. And the quality of what you were reading too. You were reading classic books. You were reading the things that were difficult, especially at your age, right? So you were reading things that were really something that was on a higher literary level, not just in thinking, but also in terms of language and
Yeah.
in examples. And I love that. That's what having classic. Not that you have to read everything that's an old book, because just because it's a classic, it doesn't mean it has to be old. It just means something you
Yeah.
learn something from every single time you read it. So when he's saying like, I reread all these books over and over again to understand them, he's also gaining stuff every single time he reads it, which is super cool.
Oh my goodness. It was like reliving. Uh, I would live in the world of the book that I was reading. My favorite when I was a kid was The Yearling, which wasn't super old of a book, but it was about a boy that lived in Florida who found a deer and raised the deer because it was an orphan. It was a really good story. And that and the Sherlock Holmes books, and Herman Melville's Moby Dick was just too hard for me to finish at like 8 years old. But
Oh, at
um,
8, you weren't
it
finishing
was,
Moby Dick? Come on.
I couldn't finish it, but there were parts of it that were awesome and parts of it that were terrifying and would give me nightmares. And I was like, I'll read this when I'm older. And now I go back to some of those books and it's like, whoa, this is really good. And some of it I reread, like Jules Verne or Sherlock Holmes. Those I still reread, and they are still excellent books. Oh, I love books. I spent an hour at the bookstore actually before this call.
My son is exactly the same way. He's like, "Can we just like," I had to put a limit on him at the library. I'm like, 15 bucks. 15. That's all you get. 15 or 10, right? So, you're like, "Come on." He's got like this huge stack over there.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he would. He's like, "How many books can I get for $25?" He loves now that you can get used books, like on
Yeah, that's
abe.com and
where I
stuff.
was. Used bookstore.
Yeah, I love the
Yeah.
smell of a used bookstore, right?
Oh my goodness.
Oh, it's so amazing. You guys are totally geeking out. I love it.
Yeah, here in Nashville, we have a really cool one called McKay's. I go there literally every week.
Oh man, I love that. I absolutely love it. That is amazing. So, in terms of homes, in terms of what prepared you, one of the things I think you were just talking about is that you were at a thinking level and a language level, that you were constantly challenging yourself. And I know that that's huge when you're going out in the world, you guys. You're constantly like problem solving. We're constantly trying to think and, interact and innovate, right? Which is exactly what you do now. And so that's a huge, huge skill that you've developed through homeschooling, right? What are some other skills that you think you got through homeschooling that really prepared you for being a multi-entrepreneur?
Well, that's a really good question. So my dad had this thing where he would submit our grades. He would fill out the grade sheets for the umbrella school that we were part of in advance, and would put all A's in there, which is fairly common practice among homeschoolers. And he was like, "We are Remboldts, Chris, and we have honesty as one of our house values. And so I want all of these A's to be truly earned A's.
Mm,
Now, on the other side of that, it's okay if you take a test and you get a B or a C or even fail it. That's okay. You just have to go back and figure out what it was that you missed about the material. And this actually was very useful for me in a, I mean, mastery, that's really important, right? But it was useful for me in a kind of a kind of a sneaky way, in that I could calibrate my feeling of mastery of a topic more accurately for each test. Instead of just taking a test once and then you get that grade and you move on, instead I would learn what it feels like to actually understand a topic and have the ability to use that information in a practical way and demonstrate that on a test. And having that calibration of whether or not my feeling of mastery matches the reality has proven very important for me in entrepreneurship, because I know if I'm weak in an area in one of my businesses, and I know what it feels like to not be weak in that area. So I have more of an earned confidence, because it's easy to be confident in a topic, but that confidence sometimes doesn't match reality. And it's also even easier, I would argue, to be unconfident in an area that you actually are proficient in. So
Mhm.
calibrating, knowing whether you're good at something, and whether that will stand up when the rubber meets the road is very important, and that really helped me. That and the habit of just trying until I actually could pass the test was foundational.
I love that. And I love that your dad was like, "Hey, look, you're gonna fail. It's fine," right? Like, it's
Hmm.
totally cool. And that's the
Yeah,
beauty of homeschooling, is that you can go back. I've never given my son a grade for anything, but what we do is we say, "Okay, here's where okay, this math problem didn't work out right. So let's figure out like how, let's look at it again." It's what we always say. Let's just figure it out again. Let's relook at it.
right.
And that is such a useful skill when you're saying, yeah, we can go into the world and we say, okay, this something I don't understand here, something I messed up, or let's reevaluate it and let's create that mastery, like you said. And for failing forward, right? Failing forward,
Yeah,
we're
that's how life
focusing.
works.
Yeah, it's how life works, right? It's okay to do that. And that feeling of, oh, it's okay to fail, like that's huge, because in school we don't normally get that. We get the like, oh, you failed, that's it, you're done, right? Because we don't have time to go back. As a teacher, a public education teacher, when I was
Yeah,
teaching high school, I was like, I'm not going to go back and re-give a test to every single kid, just because they got one or two or whatever problems incorrect or something. I'm not going to do that. I don't have time. We don't even have time for the stuff we're supposed to do, much less go back and retest everybody. So to have the ability to do that is really, again, subconscious, right? Like you said, it became something that just became part of you, and
yeah,
love that.
and it also, taking a absolutist approach to "you've failed" or "you've succeeded" also has the unfortunate effect of having like an unhealthy construction of ego. So
Yes.
you identify as a winner or you identify as a loser, when instead you could just not identify as either of those things, and instead just have a habit of, well, if something's interesting to you, you're going to get it right eventually.
Yeah, that's exactly what you were talking about before with the confidence, and I love that, because you're like, you have this
Yeah.
confidence of, I can learn it. I don't care if I know it now, or, I'm good at it now. I can get better and I can learn it to mastery no matter what. And that's such a huge skill, because you can say in public school is a lot of like, oh, well, you're not a very good writer. I know, I got that even in college. I was an English major. Seriously. I was an English major with a teaching, emphasis. And in my papers, oftentimes my professors, I even had one professor that was just, oh my gosh, she was something else. She worked a lot with grad students. And so for her, an undergrad was like, oh, you're so, juvenile. And so my papers, I never used like really high level, fancy vocabulary. I was
Sure.
very practical. And so her I remember one comment she put on my paper was, "It's good. It's not as good as some of the heavies," she's put in quotes, "but it's okay." And she literally told another English major friend of mine that in her office hours that, she couldn't believe he was an English major because of how he wrote, and like how those kind of comments just really, as a teacher, they make me incredibly insanely upset, because those are confidence building, right? Those are the confidence things that you get, that you hold on to. I always thought,
Yeah.
I wasn't a good writer because, I just use a simple language or something in all my papers. And she wasn't the only one to say that, but not in that way. People were nicer otherwise. But then I got into doing, developing the Freedom Scholar, and I started blogging, and I was like, I actually really love writing. And I'm actually pretty decent at it. I'm not like, super high level vocabulary, but that's not what people want to read. That's not accessible. And it
Writing is
grows
fun.
over time as you read more, right? So I'm not
Yeah.
writing a fourth grade level, but I'm not writing to, I'm not writing a paper for an academic journal either. So
Nobody wants to read that.
right, right, exactly. Exactly. So, I love that, is that you get that confidence of like, I don't know it right now, but I can totally learn it. Maybe I'm not that good at it right now, but I will get better at it. And that's something I love that you come across. So, how do you apply that necessarily in your in business building? Because I know I'm an entrepreneur now, in I've been an entrepreneur in various forms for a long time. But how do you apply that in terms of business building, especially when you're just starting out? Like, say you're young and you want to be an entrepreneur. How do you apply that there?
Well, we to answer that question, we almost have to go back to like college and career. So college was easy for me. I just went to Middle Tennessee State University, was an aerospace major, got my flight training there. I have like 5 different pilot's licenses. And I thought that was my career that I would go into, just because I fell in love with airplanes out in Kansas. But then I realized that, and college was, I got I think not a super good GPA. It was like 3.66. It was cum laude. I mean, it was honors, but that's just because I enjoyed freestyling a little bit on my papers. But
Me too, man.
yeah, and then after college, I was like, I don't want to have an aviation career, because I want to have actual relationship with someone who could like become my wife. I don't just like want something where I'm gone all the time. And that was regional airlines. And I also wanted to get rich. I think most young people want to become millionaires, and I was no exception there. It's a very common thing. And I was like, I'm not going to get rich being a flight instructor for $5 an hour. And I'm not going to get a long term relationship by flying for regional airlines. And those make like 30, 40K starting out anyway, and I'll be gone all the time. So I compromised, and I was like, I'm not going to do the thing that I set out to do. I'm going to go into an office job. I went into a sales job in a cubicle, sending Excel spreadsheets that were quotes for renewals on hardware service for boxes that lived in data centers of small to medium businesses. And if that crushes your soul, it should.
That's
And
very
yeah, it was like being a rat in a maze, but it was very easy. I won bonuses every single quarter. I maxed out my quota, would hit regularly like 110, 120% of quota, and won company-wide awards, was recognized by the CEOs that would cycle through this company. And again, the homeschool advantage of just like achieving mastery at the thing that's in front of you worked out well for me. And it was then that I really to this is back to your question about entrepreneurship and homeschool habits. It was very soul crushing to work in this place. I made pretty good money. At least I thought at the time. I wasn't on my way to becoming rich though. I kind of had hit the ceiling. I was making like, I don't know, like 60K, which was about 20K more than the average person that worked there. So by comparison, I'm at 150% of my peers, but I'm also giving up all of my time and schedule to do something that, when I zoomed out a little bit, felt a little bit mediocre. And so I actually ended up getting fired because I was like non-compliant with a make work assignment where they would have us like call our customers a certain number of times a day. And I had 30 customers and I had to make 35 calls a day. And these sales cycles lasted like probably 2 or 3 months at least. So calling them 60 times in a sales cycle would actually bother them. So just to make a point, I would like dial like a automated line 100 times in 5 minutes to showed up on the call report as the outlier. And that ended up that bothered them, but that kind of made it easy for them to say, you know what, this guy's expensive. He always gets his bonuses. He's a big part of the cost of running this team because he achieves so much. And that's actually a problem in a lot of places with an achiever in corporate, is you become expensive. If you don't want to be promoted, which I didn't want to be promoted, then they can't promote you out of that, and it just becomes an expensive issue. That was probably the real reason that they let me go, but me being non-compliant made it easy. Then I was like, okay, finally, I get to be an entrepreneur, and the sky's the limit here. And so I started my own business. I started a insurance sales career, and it's fully commission only, self-employed, pretty entrepreneurial, because how you get your customers is up to you, and you don't get paid unless you make sales. So it was kind of a business in a box sort of entrepreneurship, but I ran it differently than most of my peers. I would actually go make relationships with people who sold life insurance and people who sold car insurance, because they never offered health insurance. And so I would become their friends, and I would refer some of my customers to them. And I would say, what do you guys do when somebody asks you for health insurance? And we're like, we send them to the internet, healthcare.gov. And I was like, how about you send them to a friend that will make you look good? And so I didn't have to buy internet leads. I would actually not have to have that expense in my business where I spent money to get the contact information of someone who might be looking for insurance and sit at a desk and dial all day. Instead, people were calling me. And that ended up actually making me wealthy. And I got my wish of becoming rich. And it slowly dawned on me that rich isn't what I really wanted. And this happens to a lot of people in their late 20s, early mid 30s, is like, you want something, and then either you get it or you don't get it. But either way, you realize that thing wasn't necessarily what you wanted. And I should also mention that I met my wife at the corporate job, and that was like, okay, I love this person.
That's
I'm
all
gonna
you
be with
needed
her
from
forever.
there.
So I'm out, y'all. I'm out.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
making
all.
the fake
You
calls.
got what you needed.
I'm gone. Yeah, but from there it was like, oh my goodness. So I was able to achieve high income, and I was able to like buy my dream car, which some people will hate on, but some people will agree with me. Tesla Model X performance. And I was able to buy a house, and my wife's an entrepreneur too. And we just had this amazing like income stream, and it was doing very well. But I saw a lot of my peers in the insurance business like making 2-3 times as much as me and taking it even further. And I saw their marriages falling apart. I saw them missing out on all the things that their kids did. I saw them trying to find within materialism or status the thing that made them happy. And I was just like, that's not for me, man. I got to figure out what makes me happy. And it sure as heck is not insurance. And so I started researching some things that I really enjoyed, even as a kid, which was computer code. But that's my story. That's a long answer.
Nice. And you know what I love that you mentioned as well is you really had to focus. And I feel like this is part of your homeschool experience. Tell me if I'm wrong, but the idea of family and wanting that connection and having relationships. And that's what I feel like people don't talk about enough with homeschooling, is that that's one of the biggest beauties of homeschooling, is the close relationships and actually knowing what a whole relationship looks like, a real relationship.
Yeah, so the Harvard development study, it's a study that really has kind of been hitting like the Twitter and books and podcast space recently, because it's 85 years old. It's been they studied like groups of Harvard students and people from a really poor area in Boston, and just watched these groups of people grow up, and interviewed them like every couple of years, recorded them, asks their spouses things, and just like study these people for 85 years. It's really unprecedented study. And what they found was that there was really no way to predict who would like get rich or whatever. It was actually not even an indicator of happiness or anything. Like the poor people would get rich and the rich people would get poor. The poor people would live a long time, the rich people would die early, or vice versa. Like there was no way to predict how someone's life would turn out except for one thing, and that was the quality of their relationships. And if they had a strong relationship with their family, that was very, very indicative that they would live long, survive diseases, be happy, be fulfilled, and just having strong relationships with your family, and creating a family and having a spouse that you have a strong relationship with. That was the most valuable thing.
Yeah, so I've heard of that study before, but I don't remember the name. Do you remember that name of that study?
Yeah, it's the Harvard Adult Development Study. If you just look up 1938 Harvard Development Study, you'll find it. It's very famous. There's a book about it that just came out.
Yeah, I've heard of it before, and definitely it's something that people often ask, like, there's two brothers and one becomes actually, this is something that happens a lot in our United States history, is several presidents that we've had. It's you probably know about this, is that there's several presidents. It's almost like a requirement to be president, almost, that there are two brothers and one becomes president and one is like actually like in jail or has been like that. There's so many presidents in our United States history that have had that happen. It's
That's
really
crazy.
interesting about the choices that you make too, right? So
Yeah.
and so thinking about that, I mean, how many, like, what other kinds of things in terms of, especially what you're doing right now, one of the things I think of is special about homeschooling is savoring that creativity and ingenuity and, that kind of like just imagination sort of thing. How did you really focus on that? I mean, obviously you lived in books and stuff, which is awesome, but I see a lot of that in how you're developing what you're doing now in your businesses. So what can you speak to that a little bit about your homeschooling experience?
So I listened to a podcast called Huberman Lab. It's about neuroscience. It's about the study of human behavior and optimizing like your creativity and your drive and your ability to focus and your health and your longevity. It's a very well-known podcast, Huberman Lab. And he has this thing, Dr. Huberman has this thing where he's like, the opposite of addiction is a gradual widening of interests. So if you have a large array of things that you're interested in, many pursuits, then that brings more life into your life. It makes things more rich. It's like more colors in your spectrum. And I have been very fortunate that I tend towards picking up hobbies or interests or research paths. And that was something that very much was ingrained in me as a homeschooler, is just like, if your curiosity is piqued by something, we will encourage that. We will get you a book about it. We'll take you on a field trip about it. We'll help you learn more about it. That was my parents' policy, and that's just a flexibility you have as a home educator. Whether you unschool or homeschool, you can encourage that your kids to have multiple interests. And if something takes their interest, there's not some insurmountable school schedule and mountain of homework that stands between them and that interest. And that is just such a gift. It's like when you look at nature and you see that the most resilient systems in a biosphere are the ones with lots and lots of different kinds of organisms. We can have that in our civilization, and specifically in our country, by having homes that have lots and lots of different skills, interests, and hobbies within their households. That is actually an analog to biodiversity. It will make us a stronger nation if you let your kids have lots of hobbies, because then they'll grow up to be experts in lots of fields. And if challenges come up or opportunities come up, then there's more people that are more interested and qualified in handling whatever happens.
That is so funny that you said that, 'cause that's exactly how my early days were in, like, elementary school. My parents had us involved in darn near about everything. I have dabbled in a lot of things. I did gymnastics for a while, tap dance, jazz, I did ballet, I did tennis, I did, I was an athlete for a long period of time through high school and college and middle school with swimming and water polo. But I mean, I did basketball. I don't think I ever did soccer because I don't like to run, but but I did so many things. I even hula danced because we lived in Hawaii for a long time, and so there was so many things. And I played piano for a few years, and it's just really something where you gain such a beauty, um, a healthy respect for
Yeah.
whatever that is, right? You're like, man, I know enough to know that that's hard.
Yes. Yes. My favorite hobby that I've picked up over the past year is hunting weather balloons. I There are 2 launches a day out of 150 National Weather Service sites in America, and so there's 2 opportunities every day, usually near where people live, but sometimes it's hundreds of miles. I'm lucky that I live close to one that launches them, and if the wind's just right, it will fall nearby, and I will be able to use code and the knowledge of how aerodynamics works. I'll be able to use radio direction finding. I'll be able to use map navigation, and often have to hike a little bit too. And I actually recovered 3 weather balloons in the last 24 hours.
What?
It's
That's
really
amazing.
fun. Yeah.
So do you return them to like whoever launched them?
They used to have a program for that, but now when you find them, it just says um, that please dispose of or recycle. They don't want them back, but they're cool little radio boxes in a styrofoam case with little temperature probes sticking out and a radio antenna. They're actually pretty good development boards if you're into hacking and coding with computers. You can actually use them for things, and they have a little radio and batteries you can use for your camera or your flashlight. It's a lot of fun.
That's amazing. I've never heard of that before. That's so cool. That
Yeah.
sounds fun. My son would be all about that. That's very cool. I'll have to look that up. So and the other thing I was thinking about when you were talking was that your interests are important. And that's something, and that's learning too. Your interests are learning too. And it's important, just as important learning as doing, the quadratic equation. Like it's
Yes.
just as important. And I love that you can do that with homeschooling because it's not determined or predetermined for you. Obviously, you can do school at home and that is predetermined, but you can also mix stuff up and you can do, more interest based or, just have a balance, which is really good. And I love that that's I feel like is a really big skill that that something that you're interested in is valuable.
Yes. Absolutely. There is somebody, if you're interested in something, there is somebody somewhere that wants you to serve them in that topic.
Absolutely. That is definitely something I've learned in being an entrepreneur is that there is an audience for darn near about everything. And it seems like every little niche there's somebody that definitely.
Yeah.
So, as we wrap this up today, I want to just kind of introduce everybody to next week. We're going to have you back. Thank you so much for coming today.
I'm excited.
I'm super excited to have you back next week to talk about what you're doing now, which is in terms of AI, right? And we're going to talk about homeschooling with AI. And so, can you just tell us a little bit about what you're dabbling in now? Because I feel like this really applies to what you learn as a homeschooler and how you're applying your creativity, your ingenuity, your on to entrepreneurship and inventing things like you do now and the writing code and stuff. So what kinds of things, because I know you're like, you know, checking, writing code for this program to do something it wasn't normally doing. And I saw you having like a Raspberry Pi thing you were coding to do something that like I've never seen it do before. We have a Raspberry Pi and I don't think we know how to use
Nice. They're really
it.
fun,
My
really fun
husband
mini computers.
Yeah, my husband's still he teaches STEM and Lego robotics in middle school. So, but we haven't actually figured out I think we need a different cable or something, but I'll have to talk to you about that.
That's usually what it is.
Yeah, yeah. So what are you doing with AI in terms of all your business adventures now?
Okay, so I've been studying AI since probably 2018, and what it really is just a new way to organize knowledge, and it ends up making the knowledge interactive. And so we could go into way more depth than that, but
We will
um,
next week.
yeah, good. But what I'm using it for right now is to make apps. I'm not a very good coder. I'm an okay coder, but AI is better than me at code, and it can answer my questions. It can help me figure stuff out, and it can help me build something that, I mean, I built a app for my wife's project, and it took me about 14 days to get it really good. And we had a minimum viable product ready within like 3 days that I think about 80 people have bought so far. But the new version is even more powerful, and I think it will. Oh my goodness, the things that I was able to build into the new app are absolutely insane. But the point is, in 2 weeks, I was able to do something that would have taken probably two or three people that you'd have to pay probably at least $120,000 a year. It would probably have taken them about a month or more. And I was able to do it in 2 weeks by myself with the product that costs like $20 a month, and actually start making money with it.
That's amazing. I love that. And, we were joking earlier, we're going to talk next week about having, using AI and homeschooling and the possibilities there. And I have to, so if you're a skeptic like me, an AI skeptic, then we're going to talk about that too, because I know that Chris, just speaking with him, has opened my eyes to a lot of different ways that we can actually use homeschooling to and AI to really to do things in a more efficient manner or more creative manner, which is really interesting. And
Right.
so, and I love that. I had never even thought about that before. Can you tell everybody, how do we find you? How do we, like what you're up to and things?
Yeah, so I actually have a course for homeschooled high schoolers. It teaches you how to use artificial intelligence tools and how to make things with them, how to do things like make web apps. I actually have a couple of lessons about how to make web apps like the ones that I'm making, and just how to use them for creative expression and entrepreneurship, and even learning other subjects. It is called futurehomeschool.com, and it lives on a teachable platform. So that handles all of the like the course um, tracking and everything, but it is designed to be a half credit every semester. So if you need a relevant like elect, especially if your high schooler needs a relevant like half credit um, class, you can actually take mine, and I add a new lesson every single week because AI is like fruit. Like if you leave a lesson out for too long, it'll get rotten and not you won't want it anymore. It's constantly
Right.
there's new stuff happening, so I have to keep it updated. And there's a new lesson every single week, so that way you can get your full coursework in.
Well, I know my son saw that website and he was super excited to join. So he's really excited
Sweet.
to do that stuff. So you
Yeah,
guys,
that's future homeschool.
yeah, futurehomeschool.com. Follow Chris. I'm so thankful for your time today and for joining us. And I look forward to next week. And your story is inspiring. And I'm sure our audience is going to love listening to this over and over again, because I know I learned a lot always. And so you guys look forward to next week's podcast episode. We're going to be talking about AI and homeschooling with Chris again, and he's going to give you all the nitty gritty details on how you can use that in your daily homeschool life. All right. Thank you again,
Thank you,
Chris.
Kami.
Really appreciate it. All right,
Thank you
guys.
so much. It's been my pleasure.
Talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Bye.